Hello and welcome to another super amazing episode of The Sound of Money. This evening, we are joined in from the United States by Mr. David Buck, Dave Buck, as he's popularly known. He's a business owner and he's a chief time strategist at Infinity Lifestyle Design. He has over 3 decades of experience and he has one mission. The mission is to empower people with purposeful lifestyle. Now, be it in career or post career, and we're going to discuss both in and post career a couple of episodes on my podcast, which is The Sound of Money. But first, let's welcome Dave Buck. Hi, Dave, and welcome to my podcast.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. I am so thankful for the invitation as well.
Most welcome. It's an honor to have you on my podcast, Dave. Dave, I've been reading your LinkedIn profile. I've been seeing a couple of posts from you. I come across these two words very regularly about hard skills and soft skills, and more so in tandem with time management, right? So, what exactly are these hard skills and soft skills? And I know we're not going to talk about a training session per se, but it's about how to handle or manage time in any corporate, be it in India or otherwise. So, what is your perspective of this hard time and hard skills and soft skills?
So generally, hard skills are usually measurable. They're process based. There's a functionality to it. And so it's easy to either train someone on that or measure it. Soft skills, obviously more are personal, they're internal, and they're things that we are responsible, I feel, to work on more on the soft skills. They're You can be trained and coached on it, but it's your motivation that drives that. And then when you apply those concepts to the idea of time management hard skills are again tied to processes. You can think of things like the Eisenhower matrix, which is how you set your tasks up. The Pomodoro technique, where you do 25 minutes of work and 5 minutes of a break. So there's structure around that. Those are the hard skills. You can learn those and you can apply those. And then there's the soft skills of time management. And those are things, again, you're going to have to work on yourself. You can be held accountable for communication, but it's really something you've got to work on. So communication, organization, adaptability, and this general understanding of how to use your time, which is what I would consider time management soft skills.
Okay, so let's double click on time management. I mean, for us, for any corporate, time management comes over experience, right? You may be having somebody who's at the start of a career, needs a bit of channeling, needs a bit of guidance, and then over a couple of years, you kind of have that exposure and experience, and you kind of able to double hat or multitask as we call. But most of the time, and I'm going to talk specifically about a day calendar in a corporate. We click and book a time slot between 9 and 8 in 6 and in the evening or more so. But eventually, when at the end of the day, and that too, if I actually ever go back to that calendar to check box whether I've completed that task or not, you end up saying, oh my God, I haven't done half of it or more than half of it. What is your perspective on this with your experiences talking to your clients, your customers, and corporates?
So most of my clients, the reason why they come to me is they want to learn about how to be more personally productive. And I actually take them through, I said, show me your calendar today. Mm-hmm. And normally when I see their calendar, it's populated with a series of meetings that usually they don't initiate. So I find many people, even corporate executives, are very reactive when it comes to their planning of their calendar and how they use their time from their calendar. And I want people to be proactive. So I recommend that everyone, and some people think I'm crazy when they first start out with, is you plan every hour of your calendar 2 weeks out, a rolling 2 weeks out. Now, I use the term wet cement for that term because wet cement, it's poured in a form, it has structure, but it can still be changed and adjusted. And so I ask everybody to adopt a wet cement strategy. So you put structure around it, knowing you're going to have to change, particularly if you're a leader. You get into a leadership role, good leaders adapt their schedule based upon the needs of their team. Salespeople do it in the basis of their clients. So you set a structure around it, but then you plan out flexibility. So if you have to change it, you do it. And then going back to your point about working on a calendar during the day, I encourage everybody at the end of the day, you evaluate what you did and you check tomorrow to make sure that tomorrow's lined up. And then first thing in the morning, you double check today now, line it up, and at the end of the day, evaluate it again and go through that.
Okay. But and as you say, you need to adopt a very proactive approach. Maybe if you could kind of articulate that more, because, is it okay to decline, or is it okay to kind of assign my calendar invite to someone down in my chain, uh, and then convey it to the arranger of that particular call? How does that work?
That's great. That's a great question. I encourage leaders when I work with them from a time management standpoint is to look at your team's time as important as yours. Because if you have expectations from your team, which leaders all do, that they should then understand that their team has to devote time to what's important to the team goals. And so I encourage leaders to be able to have their associates or team member challenge them. So if a meeting gets put on the calendar, everyone needs to ask why. Why are we meeting?
Yeah.
What's the goal of that meeting? And meeting management to me is something that it's almost a hard and a soft skill because you have to learn nuances of it. So there is a little bit of political savvy that you need to understand in the dynamics of an office, like a subordinate going to a boss and saying, I'm not showing up for your meeting. It's probably not the best way to do it, but to come up and say, wow, you've scheduled this meeting. I have 3 things that you need me to do today.
Yeah.
Can we look at either rescheduling that meeting or help me reprioritize the things you've asked me to do because you want my time in this meeting? So it is a give and take process where obviously the subordinate respects what the leader has to do, but the leader also respects the subordinate so that you collaborate more instead of dictating.
Yeah, it's a very good point that you brought out, because sometimes your calendar gets so loaded that you just don't have time to focus on your own work. You just don't get that me time, and you end up doing that kind of work post 6 or early mornings, or actually, uh, thanks to COVID, people have now got used to go back home, re-log in, and
Mhm.
do that work. The question that I have for you is, with your experiences talking to clients, uh, you know, uh, what could be done where you have to balance it out, right? Because there are organizations, you have just tons and tons of meetings, you just don't have time to even manage your day's work or your day job. In fact, there have been organizations, during the COVID era, where they said, okay guys, no Zoom calls on Friday, which is a great concept, right? Because at least you already kind of got into that weekend zone, but at the same time you're already getting some time to kind of manage your desk, right? So what would your advice be on such cases where you just have a calendar which is choco block with meetings? How could that be managed in, and again, depends on the organization culture. Sometimes it's
Yes.
pretty not acceptable to go to a boss and say, well, I can't attend a meeting, or even a decline could be considered, oh my god, that's not done, or you need to have a very convincing reason why you have declined that meeting. So how could how one could manage, especially I'm talking about mid management or junior management, where they are in such roles and they are in such sticky situations.
No, that is good. And culture does play a role into it. And so I first of all suggest that obviously if you have a very full calendar and you're finding that pressure coming on there, is that you have to identify for you what are the priorities that you have to do because not everything's a priority. So you first of all identify I've got a 8-hour shift and 7 hours of them are full of meetings. You have to say, what are the most important meetings that I need to be at? Then you then lay out what's the goals of those meetings. And it's okay, I think, regardless of what your culture is, if you frame it and say, hey, I see I've got invited to this meeting. Why do you need me there? What's the goal? How am I going to contribute to make this meeting better? And I think you find a lot of times people, I have been so guilty of this. I just invite the largest group possible because I'm like, I'm going to get a bunch of people in the room and someone's going to help me solve my problem.
Yeah,
Whereas if people came in and said, Dave, why are you inviting me? I could challenge back. So really look at each one of those meetings and say, how am I going to contribute? And if you're like, I don't know how, then go back to the meeting organizer, respectfully say, I want to be able to contribute. I just don't know how. The other aspect is sometimes you can give them their answer before you even go in the meeting. So if someone's good at meeting organization and they tell you, here's the goal of the meeting, this is what we're going to accomplish, you might be able to look at that and say, I'm going to send them a 2-paragraph email and we're done.
great.
And sometimes that gets accepted really well because you have now freed up everybody
Yeah.
from having to attend a meeting. So to me, it's all about being proactive. It's about being respectful, and it's about asking as many questions as you can about the nature of that meeting to get clarity before you attend, so you're not having to ask it while you're in it.
Absolutely. In fact, you got uh, brought a beautiful point there. Like there are times when the meeting may be very important for your boss, but it may not be as important or may not be on a priority for you to attend. And the and many a times we end up where there are about, let's say, 8 or 10 points to be discussed, and you turn out to be the last person to talk on that 10th point. There's no point in you attending those 55 minutes of a 1 hour meeting. And I think that's where your suggestion, where maybe you could walk in the last 10 minutes of that meeting or so, depending on kind of your point of view, or as you say, 2 paragraph note to the meeting organizer that it could be a meeting update. I think that works well as well. Great. I did come across this concept of time GPT, right, in your blogs. Interesting point, because as AI, as ChatGPT is catching up and making our desk a little more easier and giving us some time to work on our own work, right? You bring a very good concept. How do you make use of that productive time? Can you explain a lot more about this amazing concept of which people haven't thought of, right? Okay, you may have AI and Chat GPT doing your job, but how do you make use of that time, fill in that gap, and make that use of that time more productively? Your views on this concept?
No, thank you. There's the old proverb, time abhors a vacuum, or nature abhors a vacuum. Time also abhors a vacuum. So, yes, as AI makes our lives more efficient, if you don't make use of the time that you save from that, you're not going to improve anything. As a matter of fact, when I wrote the article about TimeGPT, I actually said, I'm not worried about AI replacing me because there's a lot of people that are going to fill that free time with unproductive time, and I'm still going to be needed. So I feel, Chat GPT is chat generative pre-training transformer. That's what the acronym stands for. Well, time GPT is time general preparation training. So the idea is time general is that it's really no tool or system that you're going to use is going to be effective unless you're actively a participant in it. I deal with people who have the most amazing time tracking tools and they don't use them. And that's why they come to me, because they're not invested in that. So, time general to me is whatever tools you use. And I feel your calendar is the single most time effective time management tool. If we're on an email server, basically we all have it. So, if you invest time in that, you'll get the general aspects of time general down. Then the second area of time preparation is this idea of optimization versus time management. I feel time management many people look at it as a reactive activity. A boss puts a meeting on my calendar, then I got to figure out.
Yeah.
Whereas time optimization to me is where you're proactive. You've laid out your calendar for the day. So when that meeting pops in, you have a story to tell your boss or the meeting organizer that says, I had this time planned for these 3 activities. How can we negotiate something different? So time preparation is critical. And then finally, time training is that you invest in yourself to constantly self-improve, personal development that says, I'm going to do and intentionally look at things that help me be more productive. That time training is what I feel gives the average person a leg up on the competition in promotability and moving forward. I always found those that do a personal development element in it, time specific or not, are usually the ones when I find out that's why they're leading is because they did that on their own, besides the person who just comes in and says what's expected of them.
Okay. Okay. That's a great concept that you come up with, and I'm sure it's something that we can look into. Procrastination, very much intertwined with time management, very much related to we not being able to ensure some things outcomes on time. Uh, and that's something which also has, as I just mentioned, direct relation, I would say, a correlation to time management. We often tend to be procrastinating on tasks or issues or challenges we probably aren't able or aren't interested or aren't knowing about, right? Or it could be procrastination because we expect the other side to come back and chase us. Then we say, oh, let me work on my prioritization list. If that person who is working with me on this, if he or she feels it's important, he or she will chase me and then let me look into it. That's the kind of a mindset as well. What are the experiences you've had with your clients, your customers talking on, and how does one deal with it on the ground?
So of 20 measurements that I do that I work with my clients on, procrastination is number 2. Distractions is number 1 for people. So procrastination is a huge issue for people as they try to manage their time. You touched on a lot of good points that drive us into a procrastination mindset. So some of the most common ones are, it's a really too broad of a goal. It's a task that's really a project. I use a personal aspect. Let's say I wanted to paint my room here. I wanted to repaint the room, put some color in here. Well, if I put that just as something to do, as a task, then what happens is I'm more apt to procrastinate because there are a bunch of steps I need to do. I need to pick the color. I need to get the supplies. I need to allocate the time. So there's a variety of steps for me to say, I've painted my room. So that's where I tell people is when I look at it, they're procrastinating. I said, it's because you've got a project in front of you and not a task. So break those down into manageable steps. And then you find you won't disappoint yourself if you only get 1 or 2 tasks done to that project because you've made progress. And so that's a big challenge. And then typically in an environment of an office, a general sense of procrastination is usually when a leader gives unclear expectations and simply says, we need to have this report done. And then the team doesn't say, well, how big's the report? What's in the report? When do you want the report? So it sits out there and everybody languishes. Then typically what happens, a leader gets angry because their time frame that they had in their head
Yeah.
comes up and they're like, we don't have this done. What's everybody doing? So it's usually too sophisticated, too detailed of a task, and there's just not enough information.
Yeah. So is it about asking the right questions and getting to
Yes.
know?
Yeah. So as you are, and it's asking questions of others and yourself to finally get down to the nitty gritty. Again, if it's 10 or 15 tasks that you have to do, that also helps you manage expectations of getting it done. Because so many times people procrastinate because they do get stressed because they say, well, I'll get this done next week.
Mhm.
you don't have the time to get it done next week, whereas you could probably get half the tasks associated with that thing you're procrastinating on done in that week's time. So really, yes, asking a lot of specific questions until you're satisfied, either yourself or of your leader or boss, or of your subordinate too. If your subordinate's procrastinating, get them in there and ask a ton of questions, and I think you'll unpack pretty quickly what's causing them to delay.
True, that's great. With specific reference to India, because you have dealt with some of your Indian clients, uh, there is this talk, and Indians work a lot beyond the working hour. It's a culture issue. Depends on the
Correct.
organization, uh, and it can extend well beyond 8. 8, in fact, is just a given, right? It can go 10, 12. And COVID added another segment where there are occasions, and quite often, depending on the culture of the organization, as I mentioned, you log in when you reach home. But then there is this very tricky bit of commute. Typically, in any city in India, right, you may end up commuting 1 to 2 hours an average either ways, or it could be one, together, both coming to office and then returning home. Of course, you do have hybrid cultures depending on organizations where you may work on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday in the office, and the other days you are at home. But it's not surprising to be working even on weekends. And I'm brutal about it. That can happen. It depends, again, as I mentioned, the organization cultures. How does one deal with such issues? Because then work-life balance is out of the window, right? And it's very easy to talk about work-life balance in town halls, HR, function meetings, but then the reality is on the ground, it may not be implemented the way it is supposed to be. So my question to you is, within the gamut of time management, and you have these kind of very serious challenges. In fact, work beyond office hours, and especially in India, as you know, we have a young demographic dividend, as we call it. You have average 25 plus years of age as the working population, and that's the big chunk. And in coming years, that'll be adding on a lot of productivity to the Indian economy. But at the same time, it's very important for that generation to know the importance of that hard work, and they also maintain the work-life balance, because maybe their parents could handle that kind of stress, but today it's not, because there are cultures, there are office environments where it's very toxic, it's not easy, and young minds aren't in a position to take it, in the stride. So my question to you in simple words is, how does one manage these kind of challenges on time used in commuting, stress management, the kind of ecosystem around in organizations? How does one manage time in such challenging situations?
A great question, and I think it's going to be around for a while. This dynamic, much of what you said about India is also the same in the United States. So for me, I am trying to weave people away from the concept of work-life balance to more work-life flexibility. The reason why balance to me is you want to seek this level. I'm sorry, it's almost like water can either be vapor, liquid, or solid. It can't be all at the same time. You can't find that balance for a sustainable period of time. So to me, it's about finding that flexibility. Where there are periods you're going to have to invest in work for deep periods, up early in the morning, you work, you come home, you work at night. I think any of us who's any length of a career, who's cared about our career, we've lived that. The idea is you don't want that to be your full state all the time. So some of the things that I do, because I actually had to, as little as 4 years ago, I was commuting an hour and 5 minutes one way to work. So what I would do in the situations of the commute in the morning, I might have a series of casual phone calls to check up on team members while I'm driving into work. Not anything sustainable, because you got to pay attention to the drive. But I would pick low-level activities that I could communicate with people on the way in, so that by the time I got into work, I probably could have checked off a small activity. So I would look at lower level items whether it's quick communications. Maybe that time you could call your boss and say, you scheduled a meeting for me at 3 o'clock. I'm on my way into the office. Can we talk about that a little bit differently when we're in there? So you're not, so little lower activities. I always use the time on the way home for personal development and learning. I listen to a book on tape, a podcast, or something for me to unwind a little bit before I walked in the door. Also, what's important, if you have to work outside of normal hours, structure that. Don't just keep the structure during the day. What do you want to accomplish if you have to work a couple extra hours at night? You need to define that, give yourself goals, check off those tasks. So it's just not, I'm going to recover from everything I didn't get done today, because then you're not finding a way to go forward. And then I just think it's important. You have to, personal care to me is an important part of time management. It is something that you need to try to at least get 7 hours of sleep at night. If not, work your way up to it. Working that extra hour, if I just put in another hour, may or may not be beneficial. And then take formal breaks during the day. Get away from your screen, just go for a quick walk, do something different to re-trigger your mind and to get going, and then do some type of physical activity, something that gets your heart rate up. If you can do 30 minutes 3 times a week to start out with, that's a great small step to take for you to then, you'll find your energy levels up, your cognitive abilities are stronger, and you're generally more productive.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dave, for all these tips. And I think we spoke on a gamut of issues, from procrastination to managing time, your desk, your calendars, and more importantly, your concept of time GPT. Dave Buck, business owner and chief time strategist at the Infinity Lifestyle Design. Thank you so much for being on this podcast, The Sound of Money.
I had a lot of fun, and I know that because the time went by quickly. So thank you.
Absolutely. And of course, Dave is going to join on a couple of our episodes where we are going to talk, as I mentioned, in career issues and importantly, post career issues. With the recent talk about FIRE, financially independent, retire rich, Dave has his own take on it, and he comes up with another concept called life, right? We're going to talk about that in the coming episodes of this podcast, The Sound of Money, with me, Santosh. But for now, from me, Santosh Sirur, and Dave Buck, thank you so much for joining on The Sound of Money.
The Sound of Money with Santosh Sirur.